right, we are back. Welcome back to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. We are going to review all Sunday's action in Week 4. Zach, your Cowboys did their thing. My Jets are playing right now against the Chiefs. I have the TV off for a reason. I don't need this in my life. I don't want to see it. I don't want to watch it. I don't want to know anything about it. Zach, if you see anything, especially negative. See, the thing is, like, even if you tell me something positive, you give me hope, and I don't even want hope. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just want, like, I just want to, like, just take the expected here. That's the Jets to get their asses kicked at home. But we'll see.
Garrett Wilson just caught a pass. He just caught a pass for 5 yards.
There you go.
So the volume play arguers, they're here. They're here. Rise up.
Super Bowl, baby. Super Bowl, baby. All right. So let's get started, guys. Hope everyone had a good Sunday. You know, and obviously not everyone can get a win, you know, every week, but, you know, hopefully most of your fantasy teams. And this was an overall good Sunday for you. Okay. Let's start with the early game today. Calvin Ridley with 2 targets in this game. Luckily, one of them was for a touchdown. It was in a broken play. He did almost have a few touchdowns over the last couple of weeks that would have resulted in bigger fantasy days, but it's been pretty disappointing since week 1, right? 3 straight weeks of now, you know, not great. He was shadowed by A.J. Terrell in this game. Trevor Lawrence chose to stay away from that matchup. Only 6% target share for Ridley in this game, 40% for Christian Kirk. Okay. Now, if you look at Fantasy Life's utilization, in weeks 2 and 3, Kirk had a combined 24% target share, and Ridley was at 18%. Week 1 had us thinking that Ridley was back to his wide receiver 1 days, right? But he has to be downgraded at this point. I don't think we go as far as saying that he has to be like on benches or anything like that moving forward. You know, I'm still going to rank him as like a top 24 wide receiver next week, but it is a tough matchup against the Bills, even if they're without Tre'Davious White. And by the way, it looks like Tre'Davious White might have tore his Achilles, which is terrible.
Yeah,
but Christian Kirk, on the other hand, you know, had his 3rd straight top 24 finish. And I think there will be plenty of boom weeks for Ridley coming up. But if you're getting 2 targets in a shadow situation, I don't know if I can call you a wide receiver 1.
No, and this is just the reality of the situation right now for Ridley, and it's a tough one. You know, like, I mean, you take out the first week where he exploded on the scene. He had all those targets, those catches. He looked like the wide receiver 1, like you mentioned. And if you take that out, we're talking about a guy that's averaging 8 points a game on just 7 total catches over the past 3 weeks. Like, that's obviously not good enough. And that shouldn't be the case moving forward, but is there a chance that we see this string of quiet games extended next week against the Bills? Like, they just handled the Dolphins' passing offense with ease. Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, neither of them had over 11 points. So I'm a little worried still about Calvin Ridley maybe next week. I'm not saying I'm going to put him outside the top 24 if you do rankings. If we're talking rankings, I'm not sure I would do that, but I would temper my expectations definitely a little bit. Things should get better moving forward, but I'm not sure if they're going to. And not to mention, the Jaguars, they're not exactly pitching around the yard either this season. You know, they're averaging 16 points per game over the past 3 games, and that's including an interception return touchdown today. So maybe there's a correlation between Ridley's low usage and the low offensive output we're seeing, but Ridley scored today, you know? I think we'd be having a much different, much more concerning conversation about Ridley if he didn't come through for the Jaguars with their only trip to pay dirt today. And that's a little worrisome.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, I think we haven't talked about it enough, but Evan Ingram has been extremely solid so far this year. He's finished as the tight end 5, tight end 6, tight end 7, 3 weeks in a row. Okay, and then another very solid day, catching 7 of 8 targets for 59 yards. Typical of what he's done all year. You know, very consistent. You know, he was the answer to that mid-round tight end question, like of who to target. He might have been last on my list, but he should have been first.
Yeah, well, you just looked at it. We talked about how this target distribution was going to work. We're like, oh, well, everybody's going to have their games, but he's been the one constant. You know, like we've had Calvin Ridley have his game. Then we had Christian Kirk have his game. We had a Zay Jones game in there. But every game that we've seen with Evan Ingram, he's been consistent. And that's tight end's like the one position you can get away with consistently like middling production because there's no consistency outside the top 3 or 4 guys. So that you're right. With Evan Ingram, he's looked really good. And I'm not worried about him. You can keep doing the same thing. I'm not sure his ceiling is that high. We might not see games like we saw last season where he would just take over the passing game, especially with the way the Jaguars offense looks right now. But yeah, this is exactly what you were drafting him to do, and he's doing it. So if you took him, you're satisfied, and you can keep starting him every week.
The Falcons ran a ton of two tight end sets in this game, and of course, Jonnu Smith ended up leading them in production. Right, caught six passes for 95 yards. Drake London 28 receiving yards. Kyle Pitts 21 receiving yards. So more of the same from Arthur Smith. So no real update here, right? This is the same shit that we've been dealing with. I mean,
Yeah.
Drake London did catch a touchdown in London, so that's awesome. But like, again, like the Falcons are not featuring the real talent that they have, right? And if they want to start winning, they're going to need to, right? They also need to start Taylor Heineke in Week 5. What do you say, Zach? Okay, because if they do,
I'm with you.
we're gonna welcome back Kyle Pitts, okay, and we'll welcome back Drake London especially.
Yeah, Taylor Heineke, when he was with the Commanders, he was good enough to support wide receivers, and that's the thing. Desmond Ridder is not. It's been really painful this season, even though the Falcons' offense has looked good enough to be fantasy relevant at times. And what do you know? That's the case when they get the ball to their best weapon on offense in Bijan Robinson. When you give the ball to the guys that you drafted to have the ball and do things with it, that's how it works. Just a little PSA to Arthur Smith here. But I can't think of an offense in the past 10 years following football that I've seen with more high draft pedigree talent that straight up doesn't get utilized than Atlanta's. Like, this isn't new, like you mentioned before. Kyle Pitts and Drake London, this has been the conundrum with them since they landed in Atlanta. They're extremely talented players, but they've had no opportunity to do anything with that talent. Granted, Desmond Ridder is not the answer at quarterback, and he's definitely part of the problem. But they've seen what happens when they find creative ways to get Bijan the football. What's the holdup doing the same thing for a unicorn at tight end and an X receiver? I think I'm with you 100% here. Desmond Ridder, he's not the answer. He looked serviceable the first 2 weeks, not so much these past 2 weeks. I think at this point you can turn it over to Taylor Heineke if you want to try and contend this season. But who knows? If the Falcons are content with sitting and making this just a wash season, maybe they go for another quarterback in next year's draft, which they're definitely going to be taking a quarterback in next year's draft. Maybe they just continue to ride it out with Desmond Ridder. But if they want to win and compete, it's going to be good not only for their team, but also fantasy football teams if they would put Taylor Heineke in.
Yeah, man, for sure. And, by the way, we're reviewing all of Sunday's games for all the takeaways and developments, okay, from Week 4 going into Week 5. We got a game going on right now, Jets and Chiefs. We have a game tomorrow. What is it? Giants, Seattle.
Seahawks.
That should be a good one. We'll see how that goes. I'm curious to see if Evan Ingram will do his thing tomorrow. But yeah, that's what we're doing right now. Let's move on to the Vikings and Panthers. Akers did make an impact this week. Madison still got 17 carries. He went on to get 95 yards on the ground. That's awesome. Looked really good. But Akers had 5 carries himself, had a couple targets. He shared goal line snaps with Madison. Okay, Madison still ended up with 69% of snaps. That's good. And that can be fine for him moving forward. But this can reduce even more, right, as Akers gets more acclimated. It's possible. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's possible. Akers can't be started or anything just yet, but Madison can be started next week, I think, because his production has been better week after week this year. He did nothing to lose his job in this game. In fact, he played a very good game, I think. And there is a chance that, he keeps his job, pretty, in a good way. But at the same time, there's also a chance that this becomes a split. Okay, so there's a little bit of a threat here from Akers because he looked good as well in this game in the limited touches that he got. So there's a little bit of a threat looming. But for now, you can still start Madison as an RB2. But with every start, especially next week, it gets just a little bit more riskier.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I'm not going to say anything new here, but I'm not worried about Akers cutting in for at least a few weeks either. He didn't look bad. Alexander Madison didn't on the work that he got. It's clear that Madison is still head and shoulders above Cam Akers as a running back, and that's not going to change overnight. And I don't think there's really a situation, even once he kind of breaks in this backfield a little bit, that he gets Cam Akers 15 touches on the ground, with Minnesota, unless Madison goes down with injury or completely shits the bed. I don't think that's going to happen. So I think he's going to have a stranglehold on the majority, but that majority, like you mentioned, could just shrink over time a little bit. But I don't think there's ever going to be a spot where we're seeing Cam Akers dominate the backfield over Madison.
And Jordan Addison ended up with the donut. Okay, this is probably the least the Vikings are going to throw the ball all year long. Okay, only 22 dropbacks for Kirk Cousins in this game, which is more than half of what we're used to with this team. They're one of the most pass-heavy teams in the NFL. We're going to see some bounce-back weeks here for Addison. We didn't like his matchup coming into the week. We talked about it, and, that reflected in my rankings for sure. He only ran 16 routes in this game. That's going to go way up, moving forward. So I'm not
Yeah,
worried at all.
he's been getting it done on like limited usage, if you want to call it that, in the past few weeks. He scored touchdowns. He's been efficient, but things really bottom out as soon as the Vikings got anything close to a neutral or positive game script. I don't think that's going to be like the case where he just loses all fantasy value in these types of games moving forward. But if you want to talk about having a negative game script and they're going to be passing a lot, we're going to see more of that next week against the Chiefs. So I think he's probably going to be higher up in your rankings next week. If that's going to,
Yeah.
if they're, since they're playing the Chiefs, I mean, they're probably going to be playing from behind, and it's going to be a type of game like it was against the Eagles on Thursday night in week 2.
The only difference is I think the Chiefs secondary is actually pretty good.
Yeah,
The Eagles
it is.
secondary has been a little suspect for sure this year, and I do think that the Chiefs have been playing really well on defense. So that's something to consider going into next week as
Right.
well.
Speaking of Chiefs, real quick, Isaiah
Yeah,
Pacheco just ran 48-yard touchdown. There's your update for your
did he
Jets.
really?
Yep,
Oh my goodness! Wow,
the Isaiah
that's
Pacheco game. It's
amazing.
happening.
Oh my goodness. 48-yard touchdown against the Jets. Wow, wow. Cool, cool, cool. Real cool. So cool. I did not need to know that right now. Okay, thanks, Zach. Appreciate it, man. I'm not on tilt at all, but I appreciate that. Just trying to record a podcast here, Zach. Just trying to concentrate. Not a big deal at all. You know
Yeah,
what I'm
you're good.
saying? It's fine. Let's see how long I can just do this for without talking about anything real. Guys, if you could do us a favor and subscribe to the podcast, that would be amazing. Just hit the follow button, the subscribe button, the add button, whatever it is on your podcast app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to the podcast. We appreciate it. Miles Sanders, he ended up splitting time with Chuba Hubbard in this game. Seemingly because of the groin injury, he did not look good. He'd have to get right, before I trust him next week. Hopefully, he can get some full practices in before you trust him in your lineup. Moving on to the Bears and Broncos game. This was actually a pretty entertaining game, Zach.
It was.
Justin Fields came through with a huge fantasy day, not with his legs, but with his arm. Okay, 335 yards passing with 4 passing touchdowns, only 4 carries for 25 yards. That led to DJ Moore doing his thing, 8 for 131 and a touchdown. It also led to Cole Kmet having a huge day as well with 2 touchdowns himself. Now, Kmet had a 21% and 24% target share in week 1 and week 2, 26% this week. Okay, so we're seeing a little bit of a trend here, right? That's enough to see, where you're like, all right, well, maybe we should pick up Cole Kmet here, right? Three games out of 4 with high target shares. Now, this was the Broncos, right, who got destroyed last week as well. So you kind of have to take some of this with a grain of salt, maybe all of it. So, if I saw Justin Fields getting more carries in this game and more design rushes, I might say, okay, this is sustainable. He's back. But we didn't see that, right? So are you encouraged by this performance? Should we be selling Fields after this performance? How are you viewing Fields moving forward?
I think we should be encouraged by the performance, definitely, because it was like he was fantasy relevant. Justin Fields, he looked like he much closer to what we wanted him to be this season. But I also think it would be a mistake not to shop Justin Fields here a little bit because we know what we've seen from him these past few weeks, and it looks like the Broncos are primed to be just like fantasy gold. Anybody who starts against them will turn to gold. If they can fix Justin Fields by playing him against the Broncos, like I think that can fix pretty much anybody at this point, don't you think? Like the Broncos defense, it's in complete shambles, and I'm taking this with more than a grain of salt. I'm going with the whole shaker of salt here on this one. He's not close, Justin Fields, to the rushing production or volume that we saw last year to make you confident in starting him, even when he stinks it up in the passing game, which he didn't do. But 4 touchdown passes will go a long way in remedying the idea that he needs the production with his legs to produce. So it's a long season. I want to say that you can hold on to Fields and hold out the hope that he returns to fantasy form as a QB1, but you'd be better served moving off of him if you can get a good deal back for him. Like I wouldn't just sit there and twiddle my thumbs waiting for Justin Fields to turn things around. Like at this point, you have a selling point. He looked good in the passing game. The Bears offense looked good enough, even though they did lose. I think I would definitely consider selling him. He's not like a screaming sell because I think it might be difficult to get somebody to buy in the fact that he's going to have more performances like this, but at least you have something here that you can build on and he can actually return some value. If you can go get a safer quarterback or even to pair him with somebody else that had a big week this week that isn't going to have big weeks moving forward, I'd have to look more and see who that could be that you pair him with. You can go get a higher upside quarterback and a safer quarterback at that.
I hear that, Zach. That's good advice there. Khalil Herbert completely took over the backfield this week. So full stop to any talk of a Roshan Johnson takeover at this point. All right, 78% of snaps, 23 opportunities, 78% of the running back carries. He ran around on 65% of dropbacks. Okay, this is significant, man. Okay, this is significant type of utilization here. And if this holds, we have a pretty startable RB2 here. And we talked about Khalil Herbert's talent all offseason long, right? So and this development is not a product of the Denver defense. Just notice that I didn't even mention his production in this game, right? I'm only talking about the utilization here. Yes, he had a good game, but the usage is what matters to me, and it looks like this was a concerted effort for him to be the guy in this game. Okay, so I'm looking at Khalil Herbert like, okay, well, if this sticks, I have somebody that can start now.
Yeah, 100%. And this is a guy that you were kind of drafting Khalil Herbert to be. You were hoping like this would be the type of usage that we would see from him, being that he was the guy that was familiar in the system, that had been there. They brought in Deontay Foreman. He hasn't been in the picture since not even week one, really. And then Rashawn Johnson came in. He looked good the past couple of weeks. But it looks like Khalil Herbert, and I think you would agree with this here, is still the best running back by far in this backfield at this point. And nothing against Rashawn Johnson, but the way that they're going to use Khalil Herbert with his talent, I think it's just going to be much better overall for the team. And Khalil Herbert, you talk about the usage that he had. If he can keep anything close to this up, like you mentioned, I think when we drafted him, we were looking at him as somebody that could take on, like the early down goal line role, not necessarily have all the receiving work or even most of the receiving work. That wasn't really in the picture. But if you mention it, like 65% of routes, like if that can hold up, that's going to be something that it's going to be gravy that you weren't even expecting to have as part of his workload in going into the season. So I'm with you here. Hopefully this holds up, because I drafted him a couple leagues hoping that he'll be able to be like a really good discount RB2. And if that holds up, he could be on his way to doing that.
100%, man. Javonte Williams ended up leaving the game with a hip injury. But Samaje Perine isn't the clear guy moving forward, right? Jaleel McLaughlin, he's an undrafted rookie. He's had some sneaky playing time over the first few weeks of the season, alongside these two guys, Javonte and Samaje, right? And he was the primary guy on early downs after Javonte got hurt in this game. Samaje ended up with a lone goal line snap. We could see both of these guys have a role if Javonte has to miss time with that hip injury. So if I had to pick one right now, it's probably Perine, because I think, his role as the goal line back, the passing down back on a team who will likely be trailing a lot, given the way this defense has looked lately. Jaleel, I think, definitely has a lot of juice for sure between these two guys, right? So he's definitely in play. He should be picked up. But then, you got to keep in mind that they have the Jets next week. So tough matchup. As we say that, I'm thinking about what just happened in the game, right? with Isaiah Pacheco with that long run. So, maybe we take that into account when we're talking next week. But, KC, probably negative game script, right? They might drop a hundo on Denver next week at home, right? But in that matchup, I would probably guess it would be a Perine type of matchup, right? And this is assuming that this is a multi-week injury for Javonte. Early indications is that it could be a groin strain for Javonte. So we'll see. We don't know all the details. I wouldn't be spending big bucks on either of these guys, given the matchups coming up and also a potential split backfield.
Yeah, I think at this point, if you're targeting any running back in the Broncos backfield, it would have to be for a goal line role where they're just punching in the touchdowns. Obviously, Jaleel McLaughlin, he had that one touchdown reception. I don't think we're going to see that a whole lot. Samaje Perine, I think that if you had to pick somebody to be the goal line guy, it would be him, because you just look at them as their physical profiles and you can tell who's going to make more sense at the goal line. Samaje Perine's 5'11", 230 some pounds versus Jaleel McLaughlin, who's only 5'9". So I think the answer there for the goal line role that you're going to get, you don't have to look very far into it. It's going to be Samaje Perine. Not only that, but he's also more experienced. And he's going to have, I think, in most cases, a larger workload in general. But Jaleel McLaughlin, I don't think you need to leave him on waivers, but I wouldn't break the bank either going after him either. He could have some value if he breaks out a big touchdown here or there. And the Broncos offense hasn't been that bad. So I don't think you have to worry too much about either of these guys not being able to get it done if you have to put them in your lineup as a spot start.
The Bills handle the Dolphins this week. They limited Tyreek Hill to only 3 for 58. That's a recipe for success right there. If you could do that, you're probably going to win the game, right, against the Dolphins. Jalen Waddle with another disappointing week. We talked about Waddle coming into the year, man, and it seems like that regression is hitting him hard right now. But, you know, at the same time, I think he's a good buy if you want to add some upside to your roster because those boom weeks are coming. He hasn't had a boom week yet. And we know that at some point, the boom week's coming for Jalen Waddle. Okay, so you could probably scoop him up on the cheap if you want to. Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane ended up splitting carries in this game, but Mostert total only 9 yards on 7 carries. Achane went over 100 yards on only 8 carries. Okay, Achane also finished with 2 touchdowns. He led in snaps. He played 60% of snaps. He ran a route on 68% of Tua's dropbacks, which is very significant. And the fact that he kind of took over this backfield this week in terms of production and playing time means a lot to me moving forward, right? I don't think we have to wonder where Achane fits anymore in this backfield, even when Jeff Wilson comes back, right? I think that's more of a question between Mostert and Wilson now, moving forward, right? It seems to me, after this game, that Achane, he's going to be the 1A in this backfield at this point, you know, especially given the fact that he got the goal line carries in this one.
Yeah, 100%. The way I look at it is like, I'm not concerned about Devon Achane moving forward because it looks like you mentioned, the talent is there. He's doing excellent things with the ball in his hands, and he could have had an even better game if it wasn't, you know, them down by 20 some points pretty much the whole game. You know, the Dolphins. I think the bigger question for me comes, where does Jeff Wilson fit into the offense? And the answer is like really nowhere. Like, do you think Jeff Wilson? I mean, Raheem Mostert had a quiet day, but I think Raheem Mostert is still the guy that they're going to have on the field if they had to pick between Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. Like, who would they have on the field more often? At this point, coming into this season, we thought it might be Jeff Wilson, but Raheem Mostert's been doing more than enough at running back. Devon Achane is now part of the backfield. Where does Jeff Wilson fit here? Like, if you were stashing Jeff, yeah, maybe.
It would probably be goal line, if anything.
Right. But, like, what other work is he going to get? Can you rely on goal line touchdowns, with especially an offense that's going to be scoring from afar? You know, they have that capability. And this was just a rough day for them overall. What do you expect against the Bills? They're a good team. But Jeff Wilson, my concern is, like, if I was holding on to Jeff Wilson expecting to have potential RB2, you know, a couple of weeks ago, Devon Achane wasn't even part of the picture. Like, my thought is, what do I do with him? Now, I wouldn't drop him and just say that that's going to be the case. We already have 2 guys in this backfield. But I'm just thinking as you're probably missing out on some value at this point because Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert, they're going to be taking the majority of the work. I don't think Jeff Wilson is going to bite into either of their work that much where suddenly he's going to be startable or have any type of standalone value. Now, like you mentioned, if anybody's going to get their work cut, it's probably going to be Raheem Mostert because at this point, Devon Achane looks like the talent that they drafted, the Dolphins drafted him to be, and he's doing things with the ball that we haven't seen any Dolphins running back do in a while.
It's crazy, man. It's really cool. It's really cool to see. By the way, Adam Schefter just tweeted, this is at 8:52 p.m. Eastern Time, that Javonte Williams, he suffered a hip flexor, and he is not expected to miss much, if any, time.
Good news.
So it doesn't look like a serious injury at all for Javonte Williams, so which means that you don't have to worry about picking up Samaje Perine or Jaleel McLaughlin on waivers. And if he does miss time, maybe it's a week, right? That's what it seems like, according to this tweet, that a week might be the max, and they're playing the Jets next week. So did you even want to pick up one of these guys to play against the Jets next week? Not really, right? And then on top of that, you kind of have to choose which one you want to pick up. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not. You know, at this point now. That's good. We got that update. We just finished talking about him. We're good.
Zach is just like, nah.
That was short-lived. That was a good 5 minutes of deciding who we were going to take on the waiver wire.
Huge game from Josh Allen with 5 total touchdowns. He was our QB1 for the week. Huge game from Stefon Diggs, 120 yards and 3 touchdowns. He did it on only 7 targets. Gabe Davis with a touchdown in 3 straight games now. I don't know if I want to call him a sell, right? You know, he's not lighting up the box score, like, outside of the touchdowns for like, really, but, like, I'm not sure what you can get for him, right? I kind of feel like you just hold You know that he's going to continue to give you a chance at a big game because of this offense. You look at the fact that he has 2 catches, 1 catch, 3 catches, and then you're like, oh, maybe I should sell, right? He did have the 6-catch game too. Maybe you look to see if Davis, makes a difference in the trade. If this game was more competitive, Davis would have, I think, had a much bigger game. More targets, more catches, that sort of thing. But maybe he's somebody that you add on to a trade, like as like the side piece, like a pretty good side piece in a 2-for-1 deal that you offer for a stud player. You know what I'm saying? Like, what would it take for some people who are losing, right, to get Jalen Waddle, right? You offer Gabe Davis, who's been outperforming Jalen Waddle for fantasy, and then you add on something not super significant. I feel like you can potentially land Jalen Waddle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, Jalen Waddle's like the perfect idea of the receiver you want to target with a guy like Gabe Davis. Because what you outlined for Gabe Davis, he has 1, 2, 3 catches, but maybe he'll get a touchdown here. That is the definition of Gabe Davis over the past 2 or 3 years. Like, this is what we've been dealing with him for the past 2 or 3 years. Like, last year there was more.
By the way, and I'm sorry to cut you off, Zach, it's also Jalen Waddle. That's also Jalen Waddle, except like he's way better at it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, I would argue Jalen Waddle is in a better situation to produce more. There's more weapons. Stefon Diggs, we'll see. But Jalen Waddle, the thing is, like, you talk about the production, he's missing the touchdowns where Gabe Davis has him right now. And imagine if you could flip it where Gabe Davis, like, there are inevitably going to be weeks and even weeks in a row where Gabe Davis doesn't score a touchdown. That's just the way it's going to be. Jalen Waddle hasn't had a touchdown in a game yet. So you've been on the right side of touchdown regression right now with Gabe Davis. Flip that and get on the right side of Jalen Waddle's and move off of Gabe Davis before that touchdown regression hits. And he stops getting these touchdowns on 2, 3, 4 targets, 2, 3, 4 catches. I think that's awesome what you just laid out. And I would advise everybody to follow that advice that Faraz just put out, because Gabe Davis at this point, I think he's all right as a start, but like, do you really feel confident putting him in your lineup knowing that he's only going to get a couple catches a game? Like, if there's no touchdown, you're kind of screwed. You're not going to be able to do much else about that. And that's just the way that Gabe Davis has produced and what we're going to continue to see. Even in a big game, I mean, Stefon Diggs isn't going to have 3 touchdowns every game, but Gabe Davis, I think his ceiling is lower than Jalen Waddle's by a significant margin, and I think that would be a good move.
Agreed, man. James Cook ended up getting both goal line snaps in this game. That was awesome to see. That's something that he hasn't had that role so far through 3 weeks, and now he did, which is great. But I would love to stop seeing Latavius Murray on the field, like on passing downs. That would be nice, because that doesn't make any sense to me. I'll take the goal line snaps though. I'll take that. If that's the trade-off, I'll take it. It's fine. Whatever. What are you gonna do?
Right. The fantasy gods giveth, and the fantasy gods taketh away.
For sure, man.
We're just waiting to get the whole package for James Cook.
We really are.
It'll happen, I think, eventually. Hopefully, but we'll see.
We'll see. Kenny Pickett left the game with a knee injury, needed help to the sidelines. Not great for him. Mitch Trubisky is their backup, just so you know. Okay, Trubisky targeted Deontay Johnson on 30% of his throws last year. That's just for those who have Deontay Johnson. He should be back week 7. But we'll see how serious Pickett's injury is. I wouldn't expect any sort of big downgrade for this offense, because there's not much worse this offense can be, to be honest with you, because it's been pretty bad to begin with. I just hope that Pickett's okay. Pat Freiermuth also suffered a hamstring injury, so he could be out a few weeks. Are you? This is just like a bad offense potentially getting just a little bit worse, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say a little bit worse. I think it's just more of the same. Like,
right.
At this point, we know the Steelers' offense isn't that good, especially without Deontay Johnson. I think that we're going to see even more volatility from George Pickens and just in general this whole offense. Although I will say Najee Harris was running harder today than usual. I was just watching him. It looked like he was running hard.
It's almost like
even though
it's almost like he was going against the Texans.
Right? It's hilarious. But he looked like he was running hard today. It's a good thing to note there. If anything, maybe they rely on the ground game a little bit more. Maybe there's more touches to go around. But if you're going to be going 3 and out all the time, there's a chance it's just going to hurt everybody.
Najee better run hard, because there's a dude trying to take his job, okay, in the running back room right now. Okay, so he better run hard for sure. How about Nico
Right.
Collins, man? 7 catches for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns on 9 targets. Breakout years here, dude. 30% target share.
Yeah.
3 out of 4 big games from Nico Collins now. Tough matchup next week against Atlanta. Okay, but you got to upgrade Nico to a fantasy wide receiver too, man. I had him ranked as a low-end fantasy wide receiver 2 this week because I love the matchup. But like he just like surpassed my expectations, man. Okay, so I wouldn't get too down on Tank Dell's bad game. What I didn't understand was why people were starting Tank over Nico this week. We talked about it last week. Hopefully you didn't make that mistake. But C.J. Stroud, though, great start to his rookie year. The Texans are 2-2. Stroud is now second all-time in passing yards by a player in their first 4 NFL games. Okay, he also has no interceptions. He's the second quarterback to not have any interceptions in their first 4 starts. Gardner Minshew is the other one. Hat tip to Adam Schefter's tweet for these stats. I found that super interesting, which is really cool. What are your thoughts, man, on this Texas offense and these Texas wide receivers?
Okay, so first of all, I just want to say that I'm quickly becoming like a huge CJ Stroud fan. And coming into the season, I was like, he was my quarterback in this draft. I was like, yeah, this is the guy that's going to have, a really good career. Anthony Richardson was there too, but the argument was always between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. I picked CJ Stroud, and it's looking pretty good so far. I'm a big fan of him, and I'm surprised, honestly. Like, I can't say I even saw this good an offense coming. The fact that CJ Stroud is playing this good this early and they're throwing it at such a high volume, they've trusted him to throw the ball at such a high volume, it's making these fantasy receivers relevant. And Nico Collins is the one that is just returning on investment right now. Like, he was so inexpensive in drafts. You called it out. And it looks like you mentioned, the breakout is here. Nico Collins, he can be like, I don't want to call him a wide receiver 1 just yet, but he is easily wide receiver 2 right now, start in terms of where you're going to put him in your lineup. That's where you want him. And I think the same thing, Tank Dell fits more of the wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 2 upside frame. Obviously a bad game from Tank Dell, but like you mentioned, I'm not worried about it at all. I was worried to see what the passing offense would look like against a defense that's as good as the Steelers. Now, obviously, they were allowing a lot of points to wide receivers. Nico Collins came through on that. Tank Dell, not so much. But I wanted to see what C.J. Stroud would do under pressure. Like, T.J. Watt was coming down, bearing down on him. The Pittsburgh pass rush, they handled it easily. So, like, at this point, and I said this last week, it's not a fluke what the Texas offense is doing. These receivers are here to stay, and you can keep starting them at their respective positions. Nico Collins is a wide receiver 2. Tank Dell is a wide receiver 3. And you're going to be able to move forward with that and be confident that you're going to get production from them every week. Because the Texans are pretty good. They're 2-2, but I think they're better than their record.
And their defense is playing pretty good, too. Like, this defense isn't that bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, the Jaguars couldn't do much against them. The Steelers only scored 3 points against them. Like, not bad.
Remember in week 1? I mean, I think the Ravens,
right?
Lamar, they contained Lamar.
100%.
He had a really quiet day.
Yeah.
So, like, that's what you need.
100%, man. Agreed. Puka Nacua is that dude, Zach. Okay. 9 catches on 10 targets for 163 yards and the game-winning touchdown in overtime. It just gets better for this dude. Okay, and what he is doing over the first 4 weeks of his career is absolutely remarkable. If you took Cooper Kupp's 2021 record-breaking season, he's outpacing Kupp in receiving yards. Okay, and this is not rookies. This is NFL players. Okay, this is fucking crazy, dude. Okay, Cooper Kupp apparently is going to be activated for his 21-day practice window coming off the pup this week. He could be active for week 5 or not. We'll find out this week. Regardless, though, it looks like Puka is a damn good player. Okay, so there's no way he just goes away. Okay, if you sell Puka right now, don't sell him with the premise that he just takes this huge hit and is like either not fantasy relevant or like he just isn't as good of a starter, whatever. Like, you cannot sell him for peanuts, or you can't sell him for even like more than peanuts. You can't sell him for cheap. Okay, I just don't think that happens. Personally, like, he'll take a hit, but he's going to be a wide receiver 2 at the very least, in my opinion. Okay, let me ask you this question that I'm sure you're not prepared about at all. Even I don't really have a real answer for this question. Okay, when Cooper Kupp,
so this is gonna be a tough one.
It is gonna be a tough one. When Cooper Kupp comes back, who do you think you'd rather have, Puka Nacua or Nico Collins?
That one's really tough. I think I'm gonna go with Nico Collins right now. And the reason I'll say that is because we see that the Texans offense is good. We see that he's being targeted downfield. We know that he's going to be, the wide receiver one in terms of workload, guaranteed, at least every few weeks, if not most weeks. You know what I mean? With Puka Nacua, we don't really know what it's going to look like with both him and Cooper Kupp in the lineup. And that's the thing that's scaring me. I'm not worried about Puka Nacua as a player, a fantasy asset. He's going to have value. And I will piggyback off of what you said. I will say, do not let people talk you down on his value by saying, oh, Cooper Kupp's coming back. No.
Mm-hmm.
Puka Nacua is his own player at this point.
Yep.
He's not going to be dependent on Cooper Kupp's presence not being there to produce.
Yes.
But I do think that he does take that hit. That might put him, I think, in that same range as Nico Collins, where the highs are going to be a bit higher for Nico Collins and maybe Puka Nacua, because Cooper Kupp's going to be taking a lot of work. So that's just how I look at it in a nutshell right now. Obviously, I could be completely wrong, but I think by the time Cooper Kupp is back and they're splitting that workload, Nico Collins and Puka Nacua are going to be in that same stratosphere of receiver. But I think Nico Collins has a chance to have more boom weeks than Puka Nacua, who I think is going to be really solid. He's going to have wide receiver 1 weeks himself, but I don't think it's going to be quite as often as Nico Collins.
Preach, Zach. I feel like I'm in church right now. I think I'm with you. I think I'm with you on that one. Let's see. Kyren Williams, another huge game. 25 carries, 28 total touches, 72% of snaps, RB1 rest of season. Am I right or wrong?
No, you're right. 100%. There's nothing to say. Like, we talked about his usage. It was ridiculous last week. He had his first quiet game, but he had 100% snap share. Like, if this is the type of usage he's going to get, like, what really do you think? What more is there to say?
Zach, can I ask you a question?
It's funny because we have. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if you saw this, dude. Like, I saw it. Like, because I have Kyren Williams on a few fantasy teams. Did Kyren Williams, like, I saw him limping off the field at the end of the game, but I can't find anything on it at all. So maybe it was just me.
Good.
Yeah, right. Good,
Hopefully it was just you.
Yeah. And that's what kind of prompted what's his name? Ronnie Rivers.
Ronnie Rivers.
I mean, Ronnie Rivers was like kind of involved throughout the game a little bit, like, because they wanted to make sure that Kyren was was good to go and like stays healthy for the entire year, which is like what you want to see. Honestly, you don't want Kyren to play 100% of snaps, but like I saw him kind of like limp off the field. Like, I'm hoping it was because like his shoe came off. Like that could have been it, and that's possibly why I didn't hear anything about it afterwards. So I don't want to scare anybody, and maybe I should just cut this part out of this episode. But like,
leave it.
I just wanted to ask you if you saw that, and it sounds like you didn't.
No, I didn't see that. And the thing about this, I'm not worried about that being the case with Kyren Williams. I think the reason we also saw Ronnie Rivers, I think not just because Kyren Williams might have been injured, this phantom injury that we're talking about. I think it's also because you have to remember the Rams were up 29, was it 23? It was 23-8 at a certain point in this game.
Yeah.
Or it was 20-0, I think, at halftime. So this was a completely positive game script for the Rams for most of the game before the Colts put up that comeback attempt.
Yeah.
So like Kyren Williams did his work. He got his 2 touchdowns, and then once they're up, why would you run your running back into the dirt?
100%.
Especially if they plan to use him the rest of the season. So I think that also has something to do with Ronnie Rivers getting some extra run, and that's fine with me. Like you mentioned, I'm not worried about Kyren Williams. But the thing that really stands out to me is we have 2 guys like this on one offense through 4 weeks. Like Kyren Williams and Puka Nacua were not guys we were thinking about at all. Even as early in training camp, nobody was even saying these guys' names. And they're both on the same offense, and now they're both weekly starts, top 10 starts at that, at their positions. It's just hilarious to me. On the Rams, like, who would have thought?
Yeah, and I have them on the same team on a few fantasy. In week 1, after week 1, I actually spent a good amount of fab on both these guys, and I ended up winning their bids in a bunch of leagues, and it ended up working out. Hopefully, we'll see how it ends up. I want to field some offers for Puka just to see what I can get. Like, can I get a wide receiver 1? Rest of the season, is it possible? We'll see. Otherwise, I'm holding for sure.
Would you do?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just a question here. Would you do? And I know this is probably an easy answer, but I'm interested.
Yeah.
Puka Nacua for Amon-Ra St. Brown State, straight up.
Yeah, I think I would do Amon-Ra. Yeah, I think I would do.
The only reason I ask Amon-Ra is because he hasn't had that huge game yet. You know what I mean? Like he hasn't had the Puka Nakua type game,
I
but we
don't.
know he's a solid receiver.
I don't think he will either. You know, like I don't think he will have that like
Yeah.
150-yard game. That's just not who he is. You know, he's like that 9-catch, 110 yards, and maybe a touchdown. Right? That's like who Amon-Ra is, and I'll take that every week. You know, because that's like a low-end wide receiver one right there, all day long. You know, so I'll take it. Anthony Richardson, you know, like you mentioned, they came back in that game. He threw 2 touchdowns, ran for 1, 2 great fantasy days in his 2 full games. Right, it would have been a perfectly fine fantasy day in week 2 when he played only 32% of snaps. Like I would have taken that too, honestly. So there's a good chance Anthony Richardson is the top 5 fantasy quarterback this year, man. And this is why he was a buy low over the last 2 weeks. It's because of this. And if you did end up buying low, you already reaped the benefits of that. Even if I didn't reap the benefits this week, you know, it could have happened. But the fact that he's already doing this now, like within the first few weeks of his career, is amazing to see. And like, you know, the fantasy points are going to be there. And this wasn't his best passing day. Like Michael Pittman didn't do anything in this game. But and we talked about this coming into the week that he had a tough matchup. But at the end of the day, Anthony Richardson made it happen for fantasy. And he almost, you know, he came back. He led a comeback. You know, he didn't end up being successful, but he led a comeback, and it worked out.
Right. He didn't even get to see the field, I don't think, in overtime, if I'm right. I don't think he got that chance. It was like Josh Allen-esque. So he could have had an even bigger day. But the thing about me, like Michael Pittman, you know, it's not an indictment on Michael Pittman this game. He only had 5 targets. That's what happens when your quarterback only completes 11 passes on the day. And that's nothing against Anthony Richardson either. It's just the way the game was going. Michael Pittman had the highest target share of any receiver here. So that's nothing to worry about with him. It's just one of those days. But Anthony Richardson, the big thing for me, like, he's had a rushing touchdown, at least one, in all 3 games this season. Like that's exactly what you want, and that's exactly what we were hoping we would get with Anthony Richardson when we said he could have that upside to be a top 5 quarterback. That's what's going to get him there. And so far, he's delivering in that department. And then also, and talk about Anthony Richardson's game 2 weeks ago against Houston. You said he was on his way to a fine start, a fine finish in week 2. He played what, a quarter and 4 minutes or something before he got hurt. He had 2 rushing touchdowns in that game. If he finished that game, I think we'd be looking at the top quarterback finish of the year in that game. But that's just me. So like this is the type of upside we're talking, and it's even still masked, I think, by this finish that he had. Obviously, he was QB2 on the week, pending Monday Night Football and tonight. But I'm just saying, like, this is the upside that you wanted with Anthony Richardson. We're getting it. So like, you're in really good shape if you have him.
100%. By the way, the plan is to activate Jonathan Taylor's 21-day practice window this week, similar to what the Rams are doing with Cooper Kupp. We'll see if they activate Taylor for the Week 5 game and see if he plays for them, right? Like, they could keep him inactive this week. They could keep him inactive for Week 6 as well. They could continue to search for a trade. If they trade him, you have Zach Moss as an awesome fantasy asset the rest of the way. If they don't trade him, Zach Moss turns into a pumpkin. If you trade away Moss right now and they trade away JT, you're going to feel like shit. Okay, so this is a judgment call, right? Like, if I had to guess, do they trade JT? My guess is no. I would lean towards no. But it's very possible that a team swoops in and does end up trading for him, okay? Because he's going to be off of PUP, right? So it's possible, man. Yep. So it's kind of tricky, you know, with Zach Moss. Like, you know, do you trade him away? Do you keep him? If I can trade away Moss for like another RB2, it's most likely you're not going to be able to do that, right? Because there's a lot of risk there. So why would another person with an RB2 trade for Zach Moss? It wouldn't make any sense. So you know that's a concern there. If I had Zach Moss right now, I'd probably just hold, because even in a trade, like what can you even get, right? So just hold him at this point. Like if you were gonna trade him, the time to trade him would have been before this past week or the week before that. But at this point, you just hold.
Yeah. That's what it is. Like at that point, if you traded him a week or two ago, you know, Jonathan Taylor coming back is far enough out in the distance that the person getting him is like, all right, I can at least get a week or two out of this guy.
Exactly.
You know, like that's what you're dealing with Zach Moss. But at this point, now somebody's going to get the butt end of this trade, and that's what sucks. That's what makes it really hard to move him, because either the person that has him is going to get a butt end of it, and they're trying to move him for that reason, or the person that's going to take him on is going to get the butt end of it because Jonathan Taylor comes back and he plays for the Colts, and that's going to make it tough for them to want to trade for him. So, like you mentioned, you can do your best to move him if you want. If you have him, I would maybe consider moving him because, I think that Jonathan Taylor is going to play for the Colts, but at the same time, like, I completely understand if you want to stay. So we're offering, groundbreaking perspective here, saying that it's a judgment call, but that's literally what it is. Like, there's nothing you can really do about this situation. I think Zach Moss, if you have him, you're happy with what you've got from him, and you're happy to ride him out if you need to. But you're not gonna be able to trade him for anything. I think at best, people might pick him up as a very light addition to a bigger piece in a trade. I think that's your best chance of moving him. And at that point, like, what's the point of moving him? Like, just keep him in case Jonathan Taylor moves. There's upsides and downsides to all of it.
100%, man. All right, let's move on to the Bengals. Joe Burrow is struggling. 3 touchdowns total for this offense this year through 4 games. All right, only the Jets have been worse. Have the Jets scored a touchdown yet, Zach?
No, but they did score a safety and a field goal to make it 17-5.
Wow, that's a lot of scoring. Okay, who scored the other touchdown for the Chiefs?
Let me check. It looks like it was Noah Gray.
Nice.
Touchdown to him. Perfect. Isaiah Pacheco also had a 33-yard reception. So he's at 16.2 points halfway through the second quarter.
He's doing his thing.
So, and Mahomes just threw a pick. So there you go. The Jets are in business. They're actually in Chiefs territory.
Let's go, baby. All right, I'm going to turn this on as soon as we're done here.
Right.
165 passing yards against the Titans. All right. Joe's clearly banged up. He's not right. He's not 100%. I'm not sure when it gets better. Right. Huge missed opportunity for both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And to make matters worse, T. Higgins has a rib fracture. Okay, which means that he's likely going to miss time. We'll get more info on that, but I'd be prepared to be without him for a little bit. Hopefully he doesn't have to miss too much time. I'd pick up Tyler Boyd, throw him on my bench at the very least while Higgins is out. I wouldn't start him yet because I think Joe Burrow would have to be right, before, he has a good game, right? Jamar Chase couldn't even have a good game in this one. It's tough. Jamar Chase, after this game, so frustrated in the locker room. Reporters were asking him questions. Like, he was just like, I'm always open. I'm always fucking open. Like, he was upset. So, it kind of sucks. This is Jamar Chase is like, I told you, Joe. I told you to sit out till week 5, man. I told you. That's what he's thinking. But it really sucks for this Bengals offense, man. It really does.
What projection is there to do for the Bengals at this point? I mean, like, the offense just doesn't look good. And it starts and ends with Joe Burrow. That's the thing. And we could chalk it up as much as we want to that calf injury that he has, but like, there's more than that wrong because the entire offense is just not doing their thing. Now, Jamar Chase, it's okay, Jamar Chase. I don't blame you. I believe you that you're open. I don't have to watch the games to believe that you're open. You know what I mean? But Jamar Chase, a guy that was drafted top 2, in the draft, not producing like he should. Joe Burrow has not had a good game yet. It's just Joe Mixon's leaving everybody out to dry. He has no upside. And that's the biggest thing here. Like, all these guys on the offense are suffering. And it's like, could you start Joe Burrow over, let's see, who could we make an argument for here? I'd start Geno Smith over Joe Burrow even after like 2 weeks of this from Joe Burrow.
Sure.
That kind of thing. But is there anybody closer that we can say, like, maybe there's a chance? Like, I'm trying to think of a quarterback that's like in that range, fringe QB1 range.
So I don't have anybody. Brock Purdy. There's Dak Prescott. There's Daniel Jones. There's those are like the fringe QB1 guys.
Yeah. So let's just. Can we play a game of that quick?
I'm starting all those guys the Bengals right now.
Okay, yeah, because the Bengals play the Cardinals next week, and that's not a bad matchup.
It's like, how can you trust these guys at this point? Like, you got to see it, right? At this point, you got to see it.
Yeah,
you start Jamar Chase.
What we've seen has been
you start Jamar Chase for sure.
That's about it. That's about it. Can you start Joe Mixon? Joe Mixon's outputs this season: 10, 13, 14, 8. That sounds like Zeke.
He is Zeke.
Yes, the new Zeke
He is Zeke.
on the Bengals.
Joe Mixon is Zeke. He's been Zeke, right?
Right.
He has. That's who he is.
Yeah.
He's Zeke Mixon. That's that's who he is.
Ezekiel Mixon.
What is that? What is that line? Like it's in U.S. history. It's like the line, like something Mixon line. Like what is it
The
called?
Mason Dixon
The
line.
Mason Dixon line. Okay, okay, gotcha. I thought I
Mm-hmm.
could do something with the Zeke Mixon, but that wouldn't work out at all. So never mind that reference that I tried to make just now. Let's move on.
History.
What do you think, Zach? Should we move on? I think we should. Uh,
Yeah, I think it's time.
Mike Evans. Mike Evans has a hamstring injury. Chris Godwin picked up the slack with his first 100-yard game of the season. 8 catches for 114 yards for Godwin. He gets a major upgrade if Evans is out next week. Okay, it's a hamstring. Could be a multi-week absence. We'll see. Could be mild. He was on the bike, after during the game. So like it seems that it's not severe. So this is good news. I mean, as good as it could be, I guess, if you're going to have a hamstring injury going into next week. So
Yeah.
I would expect Evans to miss a week. We'll see. But Godwin would definitely be the clear wide receiver 1 there if Evans were to miss.
The takeaway here is that it's not a Cooper Kupp injury, I don't think.
No.
So that's good.
Like not at all. Alvin Kamara made his return. He had 11 carries for 51 yards in a negative game script. He proceeded to have 13 catches on 14 targets, only gained 33 yards, which is a feat in and of itself. 33 yards on 13 catches, okay? Terrible. It looked like Derek Carr limited this team this week, though. Like, he wasn't really throwing downfield at all. Kamara got all these catches because of the AC joint injury in his shoulder. Okay, Chris Olave ended up with 1 catch for 4 yards on 6 targets. Okay, that's a day to forget for Olave. Just a warning to all of my league mates out there. Those trade offers for Chris Olave are coming, and they're going to be coming in bunches, okay? But back to Kamara, it looks like he's the clear guy right now in the backfield. He played 71% of snaps, so this is good news for Kamara moving forward. Don't expect 14 targets at all moving forward, but he should be okay. This is not Jameis Winston. This is Derek Carr. Derek Carr will get the running back the ball, but I would still expect Olave to do his thing in the receiving game as the primary receiver on this team.
Yeah, and I think the takeaway for me, too, is that the majority of the work in this game, now granted, like you mentioned, it was a negative game script the whole time, is that Alvin Kamara was the guy. Like Kendra Miller wasn't much of a thought at all. So Alvin Kamara's the guy. He's back. You can start him, I think, as an RB2.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that's that bad. The offense is going to be fine. But, yeah, Chris Olave, 100%. Go buy anybody that's panicking on him. Sorry.
You got this.
Can't get my words out tonight.
You got this, Zach.
Yeah, I got it. Buy Chris Olave.
I hope you guys bought A.J. Brown when you could, because now you can't. 9 catches, 175 yards, and 2 tutties. Huge game. Devontae Smith, he owned the first 2 games. A.J. Brown owned the next 2. Okay? A.J. Brown, week winner this week. DeAndre Swift getting even more playing time as we go on this year. 63% of snaps. The gap in carries between Swift and Gainwell has gone up. Okay, 14-4, which is awesome if you have DeAndre Swift. He ran 1 more route than Gainwell. He had 2 more targets. So this is slowly becoming Swift's backfield in terms of touches. Okay, we're still seeing a little bit of rotation in terms of snaps, like, depending on the drive, depending on the quarter. Like Swift, they're kind of taking turns a little bit right now, which is a weird way to play it, because why not have the threat of your running back touching the ball when he's on the field? Okay, like if Gainwell's back there and the defense knows there's less of a chance the running back's going to get a touch, like that doesn't really make much sense to me. Okay, but whatever. It's getting closer to what you want to see if you have Swift. Okay, it's also nice that Boston Scott didn't see the field at all. Okay, so Swift, I think he should remain. He was ranked as a high-end RB2 this week. I think he should remain as a stronger high-end RB2 moving forward.
Yes, higher security RB2 moving forward. And it's just beautiful to see the Eagles capitalize on his talent where the Lions wouldn't.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, this is just like, if you're a DeAndre Swift fan or somebody that drafted him last year and this year, which I didn't do a whole lot of that because I was worried that it would be the same situation with DeAndre Swift. Like, this is the usage that we wanted to see with the Lions, and DeAndre Swift looks good. He's easily the best running back there in Philadelphia. So I don't have any reservation about starting him, moving forward. I'm not even thinking about Kenny Gainwell. Like, well, maybe there's going to be him cutting into the workload. Sure. But DeAndre Swift is a higher upside guy, and they're giving him touches and valuable touches. Like, he's scoring touchdowns, which is going to be easy to come by behind the Eagles' offensive line. The offense is just that good. I love it for DeAndre Swift. I hate that he's on the Eagles and that they're doing it, and he's doing very well. But any other team would be great. But also, you can't take away from the fact that DeAndre Swift looks very good, and he's going to continue to do his thing as long as he's healthy. And you just have to hope that he stays healthy because he's doing great things for you and your fantasy team. Now, granted, his ceiling I don't think has been reached there yet because they are working Kenny Gainwell in. I don't ever think he's going to make it to that point where he's just like this complete workhorse. But what the work that he's getting right now puts him in the conversation to be an RB1 every week. It's not like he doesn't have that opportunity.
Yeah, it does kind of suck that Kenny Gainwell is still the primary 2-minute back. He did share there was 2 goal line snaps in this game. Gainwell did get one of them, but in every other situation, Swift is dominating snaps. Devontae Adams ended up hurting his shoulder in this game. Obviously, O'Connell was the quarterback there. Not like, this wasn't the ideal. I wouldn't take away too much from this game, to be honest with you. But he ended up coming back in the game. I don't expect him to miss any time. It's something to monitor next week. He'll, it's, just want to make sure that he doesn't fall on that shoulder again, right? That's like the primary concern there.
Yeah.
Also, go by Jacoby Myers after this 2 guys performance this week. Jimmy G should be back next week. Myers should get back to that high target share. He was on our buy list this past week. And if you want to know why we want to buy Jacoby Myers, just go listen to the episode that we put out a few days ago. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on to the Chargers, Josh Palmer ended up leading them with 8 targets. He led them in production as well. Extremely low production for the Chargers just overall. It's kind of disappointing, honestly. If you had Justin Herbert, like, he had a good fantasy day because he ended up with the 2 rushing touchdowns. But Quentin Johnson, he only ran 4 less routes than Palmer. He ran only 5 less routes than Keenan Allen. I think Quentin Johnson might end up being dropped in some leagues after this performance. So if I had him, I'm definitely holding on to him on my bench. Okay, I'll pick him up if he gets dropped. And low key, like, see if you can add him to deals. If you can make some trades as an add-on for you to receive. You know what I'm saying? So we should see a lot more output from this Chargers passing offense in future weeks, and we could see QJ doing some more of that, being more active in this offense and having more production at some point. You just kind of have to be patient. Like, we're used to these rookies popping off early, right? But just remember, like, Jackson Smith-Njigba, the best prospect in this draft class, he didn't pop off yet. Okay, Quentin Johnston, and admittedly, like, I'm not the biggest Quentin Johnston guy. I had 4 other wide receivers ranked above him coming into this draft class. However, like, he's still a first round rookie, right? He still has abilities that I think could translate in the NFL. So they just have to use him right, and if they do, he has a lot of upside. Okay, I like Palmer as the short term pickup that worked out, but I think the long term upside play is definitely Quentin Johnston. So just want to put that out there just to make sure you guys know that Johnson is getting the playing time necessary for him to potentially do something this season.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just like what is the biggest signal to me that there's better days coming for not only Quentin Johnson, but also Josh Palmer and all that. You just look at Keenan Allen had 5 targets. So, like, I wasn't expecting this at all. I thought it was a decent matchup for the Chargers receivers. I thought there would be more going on, but the Chargers went up, and then they didn't have to do much after that. And when Khalil Mack is sacking the other quarterback 6 times in a game, like, you don't have to do a whole lot on offense to win the game. So better days are coming 100%. And, just another note on this game, going back to the Raiders, Josh Jacobs looked like Josh Jacobs for the first time this year. And, of course, that happens with Aiden O'Connell at quarterback. So we're going to see what happens moving forward. But at least Josh Jacobs looked like himself. He had 11 targets. That's awesome. But with Jimmy Garoppolo coming back, that shouldn't be the case moving forward.
Probably not. But he's still somebody that you're starting every single week. I just saw this play action from Zach Wilson to CJ Uzomah, the video.
Yeah.
And it was pretty nice. It was pretty nice. I love it. So
it's a close game.
Close game, man.
Like, I don't want to
17.
I don't want to
17-12 right now. That's amazing, man. That's awesome. All right.
Yeah, I don't want to get anyone's hopes up.
Yeah, I know. You're talking about me, right? Marquise Brown, low-key killing it this year on what was a slept-on offense by everyone. There is production here, right? There are fantasy-relevant players here. Like, multiple fantasy relevant players, right? 2 top 20 finishes for Marquise Brown in weeks 2 and 3. He's the wide receiver, 15 so far this week. Okay. He has a good chance of having another top 20 finish. Okay. So potentially 3 top 20 finishes in a row. Zach Ertz getting it done with 10 targets himself. He looks like he's back as the guy there. Michael Wilson, someone I've been on since the Senior Bowl as well, 2 touchdowns for him. A lot of these Senior Bowl wide receivers coming through, Zach. It's kind of funny. Specifically the ones that I've loved. Okay, but
That's weird, isn't it?
It was great to see Michael Wilson having that breakout game, though. Honestly, 7 for 76 and 2 touchdowns. I think he should be picked up on waivers. I don't know if I'm starting him next week because Hollywood and Ertz still seem to be the primary targets. I'm not spending up on Michael Wilson either, but I would put a couple bucks down to see if I can get him because I think he could be a quality receiver, X receiver in the NFL. But yeah, man, like this offense, like actually doing some things.
Yeah, and it's hilarious because nobody was expecting it, like you mentioned. And I'm going back to that conversation we had about Joe Burrow trying to find a quarterback that you would be surprised to say you would start at this point. If somebody would be surprised if you said you would start a quarterback over Joe Burrow at this point.
Don't say it,
if you told them this at the beginning of the season. Josh Dobbs, dude, Josh Dobbs. Okay, I get it. He had 0.98 points the first week. Since then, he's averaging 21 points a game. Which is hilarious. Like, did anybody see this one coming? Like, these are stat lines that I would expect to see from Joe Burrow. It's just hilarious. Not only that, Josh Dobbs has rushing production behind him too. He has 40 rushing yards in 3 straight games. Like, nobody saw this coming, and
he's the new what's his name?
Daniel Jones.
No, who was the dude on the on the Bills forever? He's the one who got punctured in the lung.
Manuel?
No.
Tyrod Taylor.
Tyrod Taylor. Because Tyrod Taylor had the like 40 yards rushing every single week, and he was like startable every single week, no matter what.
Yeah, and it's hilarious. Like, and he's doing it independent of matchup, like Josh Dobbs. By the way,
Yeah,
he did against the Cowboys
and
against the 49ers.
Yeah.
So, listen, the Cardinals are far from the worst team, and I'm not just saying this because Dallas lost to them. The Cardinals are far from the worst team right now, and they have a much better offense than 10 or 12 teams by a mile.
100%, man. If you told me that Dobbs was only going to get sacked once against the 49ers, I'd be like, you crazy. But that's what happened. The offensive line has been a big reason why they have been able to run the ball and protect Josh Dobbs and have success. I'm really impressed, to be honest with you. You remember that video that has been going around about their head coach? Like, everyone's making fun of him.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's making fun of him about
Jonathan Gannon.
Dude.
Mm-hmm. The culture.
Dude.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best coaching jobs of any team in the NFL this year. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Regardless of record.
Over
their performance.
Just overproducing in every game.
Yeah.
What else can you ask for? For
like, we're not going to call it.
Who was supposed to? We were talking about tanking and winning 0 games this year.
Yeah, we're not going to call it overproducing if they keep doing this. It's just going to be like, okay, this is a solid team. Even though their record isn't that good, this is a solid team.
I mean, they could still get the first pick, but they could do it.
Yeah,
they could do it.
Yeah, they're in contention, but I think
they could do it.
The Bears
need do it in style.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Bears is probably.
They can do it in not completely disheartening fashion. They don't have to take their fans' hearts and rip it out of them en route to doing that.
Christian McCaffrey ripped out the heart of whoever was going up against him this week. 27 touches, almost 180 total yards, 4 touchdowns, just dominated. Won-year week for you. Deebo Samuel had a huge cardio session. He ran around a ton, didn't get 1 target. I guess you'd expect that after not practicing all week. Brandon Ayuk was the guy, though. Caught all 6 of his targets for 148 yards because he is that dude. George Kittle also shit the bed, 1 catch. So it was the CMC and Ayuk show today. That's pretty much it.
I'd say it was a CMC show.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's all there is to it.
Ayuk was the opener, I guess, and CMC was the main act, I would say. I think that's pretty much it, guys. Tomorrow we'll be back with our waiver wire show. Make sure to check that out. We'll be listing out, the top waiver wire pickups from this week. I hope this helped. I hope this helped you guys going into week 5. And we'll be back listing out our waiver wire pickups tomorrow. Take it easy, guys. We'll see you then. If you can subscribe to the podcast, that would mean the world to us. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.